Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective and the impact this has on training the next generation to live a life consistent with a biblical worldview. If you like the show, you've been listening, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button or leave a review. That will let others know the show's worth listening to, and it'll help us spread the word and serve our mission to make a difference. So again, thank you for being here, and thank you for helping us advance the cause of Christian education. Today's extra credit version of the Clearly Christian Podcast is a deeper dive into the chalkboard points from our recent conversation with John Stonestreet, president of the Colson Center. We talked about the importance of redeeming the culture, the value and implications of being made in God's image, the challenge for growing Christian schools, and we also talked about the key civilizational moment that we're in right now as depicted in the new film Truth Rising. So now for some further thoughts and questions, let's bring in our show's producer, Brian Lefelock. So good to see you again, Brian. What did you think of the show?
Great to see you, Cy. That was a really good show, and you were under pressure. He has 8 million listeners a week.
80 million.
80 million.
80
listeners.
million.
That's not even... And we're doing well on this show, but we're not quite to that part.
No,
what was
we're
it like
not quite
to talk
to
to someone who has that kind of an influence on that much of the civilization? His message is so important, and he's getting it across to these people. What was it like talking to John?
Yeah, it was a little intimidating. Certainly not going to lie. But I had to remember that, he's got 80 million listeners for a reason, so let him do his thing. And they're not tuning in necessarily to hear my perspective, but definitely we can feed off of some of his insights. And I knew what I was getting into, but there's a reason why 80 million people follow along. I've heard him say, a lot of that before, always high level, high quality. So it's just really spot on. I mean, he lives it. I mean, that's who he is, off air, on air. When you talk to him off to the side, those are some of the things you're going to talk about as well. So I just appreciate his ministry.
Yeah, and so for this deeper dive, we won't try to re-say what he said, but I want to dig deeper into some of your thoughts about those things. I strongly encourage folks to go back and listen to that show, though, because, man, what a message and what a way to deliver that message. He did a great job. So I'm interested. He was talking about normal. He talked a lot about civilization and this point in time where we seem to have so many different viewpoints on what's right and what's wrong and what's normal. And I'm interested at Mansfield Christian Schools. Like, I'm interested in public schools too. How do we determine what is normal, what's okay to be normal, what's too far gone that we can't shift back? It's a slippery slope when it comes to the definition of normal.
Right. That's a good point, because really, if you carry that out and, you're wisely kind of going down the road there, because if you carry out and say, hey, who gets to define what is normal? I mean, there has to be some standard, right? There has to be some absolute in place. Somewhere you have to draw the line. It's exactly what you were just saying, where you say, nope, this is not acceptable and this is okay. And, and now normal is just now the phrase that we're using. But that's why, as believers, we're saying, listen, ultimately, you just can't play this game of humans determining what's okay and what's not, what's quote unquote normal and what's not. Because like he said, years ago, we never would have talked about, even homosexuality or transgender or things like that, and now we just say, well, the fact that somebody wants to transition to another gender, well, that's probably just a normal dynamic in this culture. And we go, what? How did that all of a sudden become normal, right? Well, nobody was drawing a line at any point in the culture or the government or the powers that be that said, no, absolutely not. This is a line that can't be crossed. This cannot be accepted as normal. So ultimately, you have to come back to, and that's what we try to do at schools, you have to come back to saying, whatever behavior you see out there in the world, whether that's on streaming or radio or something like that, advocated by a celebrity or something like that, whatever message you hear, go back to Scripture, go back to your faith, go back to God's Word and say, does this line up with what's real and what's true? And if it does, then it's acceptable. But if it doesn't, then we can't label it normal and say that that's okay, because it's not, right? Not everything gets a blanket stamp of, yep, normal, 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 no, it can't be like that, right? Because that's absurd. You can't say, you know what would be normal for me is to go out and, kill everybody that I don't like, and let's cancel those people out. And right, and they're saying something that I'm opposed to, so I'm going to go out and eliminate that person. You can't do that. That's not normal behavior. There's laws against that. Murder's wrong, blah, blah, blah. And so we have to draw those lines where obviously God has intended them to be.
And so let's talk, though, a little bit about your school, because a lot of younger people will say, oh, come on, you're an old person telling me these things. This is the way life is now. This is normal. And I think there's some truth to that. We can learn from younger people. So in a generational context, what have you learned at Mansfield Christian Schools from your students? And they are excellent students, the ones that come to your school. What have you learned that's changed your viewpoint of, they've really got this part figured out. These kids really are on the ball. Maybe I can learn something from them.
Mm-hmm. Well, they do. They do. One thing we talked about even this morning, and I'm trying to figure out how the best to say this is, you must connect with them on relationships. And they definitely value, each other and, their relationships with their friends, but even with adults that they know that they can trust and they care about and things like that. And so they do really want to be authentic. We're critical of them for, they always want to find their authentic self and things like that. Well, that's because we're using that in the world's terms, because when we hear the world say, find your authentic self, well, the world means anything goes. If you want to be a cat, authentically, then you can be a cat, right? Okay, well, that's not normal. No, that not anything goes, right? But on the good side of that, they do really want to be sincere. They want to be transparent. They want to be open. They want to be honest. If you will lend them an ear and you really look them in the eye and say, hey, how you doing? How's it going? What are you struggling with? What do you need help with? Life answer. Man, they'll tell you. They have no problem warming up to adults that they trust and that they show interest in. So they're very relationally much more savvy with wiser and older adults than we were. We really kind of looked at all the adults in our lives and went, wow, you could never relate to me. You're not in our generation. We didn't warm up to adults. I don't think the boomers did really either to their parents. I don't think the Xers did to the boomers. There was a bigger gap. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. There was a bigger gap between those generational perspectives. Whereas these kids will say, no, I really value what you have to say if you truly care about me. So I'm fine to spend a lot of time with you. The other thing I would say, some of that is relational as well. We talked about it this morning with our teachers also, is our generations grew up thinking, hey, listen, if you prove to me this is true, then I'm going to believe it. And that's not the way the younger generation works. I'll go there only if it comes from a source or a relationship that I trust. And so, because they don't know what's true and what isn't true. So just because you say it's rationally true and I can prove it to you, they may go there and they may not, which sounds crazy to us, but to them, you give me that same truth through a relationship and through a context that I trust and a person that I trust, then I'll believe it.
It's interesting, Cy, that I asked you about your students and what you're learning from them. If I went to any public school right now and said, what's the problem? They might tell me these kids don't know how to relate. They don't have relationships anymore. They don't talk to people anymore. So it's a little bit different there at Mansfield Christian Schools. Well, good for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's because really in the Christian viewpoint of life, in the Christian worldview, listen, these are our brothers and sisters in Christ. So they may be adolescents and they may have a lot to learn, but this is a human made in God's image, and I have to value them as such. They may drive me crazy. Like John said, they may be 16 years old and they have a lot of life to learn. But my word, life could be over tomorrow for both this child and for me. So I need to value them as a person made in God's image because their eternal destiny is at stake here. So for me to keep them at a distance and not learn from them and them not learn, boy, that could have eternal significance. And we can't do that. We have to be there for them relationally as they desire.
You talk about having to do it. I want to switch gears a little bit. John Stonestreet is unapologetic in his Christian faith and what needs to happen and to stop the decline and the mandate that we have to do things right and to bring a Christian perspective. Yeah. And you as well in your show. That's what this is all about. It's about bringing young people into a biblical worldview to change the world from where it's headed now into a better spot. That you say the only chance we have is our young people in that biblical worldview. You know, we're coming into a point where we just had another, in the last couple of weeks, 2 or 3 different attacks on Christian institutions, churches, of course, the death, assassination of Charlie Kirk. It's not an easy place to be to take a stand like this. You take the stand, John Stonestreet takes the stand, others take the stand. How hard is it to take a stand like this in a public way and try to, and how, I know it's very important, but do you wonder about it? How hard is it to do?
It's a little sobering when you hear things like that and you see things like that. And certainly I think that's in our humanness where we go, ooh, wow. Okay, because again, that's not normal. That's not a response. And yet we're not surprised because that's how the adversary works. Yet on the other hand, I can tell you that even in the last, 5 to 7 years, it's been so encouraging as someone who does this now on a regular basis where I'm up on stage or I'm doing a podcast or I'm speaking to any sort of audience. The clearer and the bolder I am in my position for truth and saying what our biblical world is, and I'm defining it for our parents, defining it for the audience. This is who we are. This is what we believe. And when I say those things, I mean, and I'm not joking, it's like standing ovation time. I mean, they come up to me afterwards and say, thank you so much for being clear and presenting a strong, strong stance on this issue, because even as adults, we were wondering where we should go, and we need help and we need training, and I need my child to know and understand the truth. Just last week, I was at a public athletic event, and I was talking about that with a parent, and she was talking to me about how she felt about Charlie Kirk's assassination, and she was saying, listen, for that very reason, my kids are at your school, Si, because of the stance that you take like Charlie, and the stance that the school takes like Charlie did, and that you boldly put the truth out there. This is why my children are here. So when you hear things like that, that's the flip side of the being fearful, because that emboldens you to say, you know what? This is what people want. They want clarity. They want conviction. They want somebody to say, listen, here's what's really happening here. Here's the truth. Here's the reality, and follow me.
I believe that people like you and John Stonestreet and Charlie Kirk on different levels and different ways of looking at it are opening up those paths for people to also do the same for their families, and it just trickles down. And so good for you for taking those stands. I'm interested in your thoughts. Tell me more about Truth Rising and John's movie. You're going to be using it at Mansfield Christian School, using it with your staff, and why is it so important? And tell me more about why people really should watch this movie.
Yeah, and maybe it's the historian in me, as I had an illustrious 4 years of history teacher. I would joke about that. But I love this idea of looking at our civilization and where we're at. And we didn't have time to develop it on that episode, but I really want our teachers to understand that this is a significant moment in time. And I can't remember how he opened it, but really saying, listen, this history of the West is now becoming, very intertwined with human history. And this is a key point for us. So if we let this decline and we let America fall apart because we're so far removed from our foundational roots, remember he called it like a flower being cut off from its roots, and we're so far from what the founders intended now that we're almost unrecognizable. And if we continue to go down this path, we will self-destruct. And so this is our moment to say, hey, we got to get back in touch with those roots, and we have to turn the corner. So we are doing that, obviously, with the next generation, and we're training our teachers to say, okay, what do our kids need to operate in a whole new world, a new civilization? How can they resurrect those roots? And you mentioned him, Charlie Kirk, that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to take us back to those first principles of our government to say, listen, this is who we used to be, and we got to get back there. So we're trying to do the same thing with our teachers. And he talks about in that film that kids struggle with truth and hope and identity and calling. And those are 4 things that kids really struggle with, and really all of society struggles with it as well. And we've got to get back there and teach kids and say, hey, can we build our lessons around those things? Can you build lessons and units around truth and hope and identity and calling. I know you can. You should be doing it every day, in my opinion, right? And so let's build their lessons around that on a daily basis so that we can take them back to where this country started, get back in connection with those roots, and we can certainly then rise to this civilizational moment and not experience that decline that so many civilizations, Rome, Egypt, the Mayas, the Aztecs, all these great civilizations that literally lasted, hundreds of years, some cases thousands of years, a lot longer than America, before they self-destructed because they were built on bad foundations. We were built on the right foundation, but we are so far removed from it that we're in danger of losing it after a mere 250 years.
You mentioned in the show about their personal connection with not only John Stonestreet, but the Colson Fellowship Program and things of that sort. And it really feels to me like it's a very personal, very passionate viewpoint that you have, this relationship that you have with that entire structure. If someone's listening to this show right now and they haven't heard the other show yet or haven't heard of John Stonestreet, what about John and the Colson Center has you so charged up? And as we wrap up and you finish up the show, why should someone really focus and learn more about what they're talking about there?
Yeah, as I said, I've been a believer my whole life. I was saved at 6 and grew up in a Christian home and Christian church, Christian school. So this has kind of always been a part of me. But I was struck by, again, the power of new learning, even at age 56. And he really talks a great deal about how important it is to look at your cultural mandate as a believer so that you can impact the culture. And then also, what does it mean to be human? And it really gives you, and it's given me, this really fresh perspective of my faith and what reality is, and then really able to see things for what they are and saying, whoa, this has crossed the line. This is not normal. This violates what it means to be human, and really calling it out and saying why this is not the best path for us. It doesn't fit in God's original design. And I love that he talks about, too, what are you saved for? We don't want to just talk about what you're against as Christians. We want to talk about what you're for and what new life and how beautiful your life can be in Christ when you live according to his design. He knows what's best for us, and he just plays that out, or he just develops that so well in that Colson Fellows program. So if you're interested, go to the colsoncenter.org, look up the Colson Fellows program. I think I read 12 or 13 books in the course of the year, which sounds really awesome in some ways, depending on what kind of reader you are. But they really make it easy for you. There's questions to answer. You do everything online. It really is a wonderful program, and I couldn't be more grateful for what I learned. So it's a tremendous program. Well, thank you so much again for joining me today on the Clearly Christian podcast. And I trust that now you know more about our cultural mandate as Christians and the importance of this moment in time for both our Western civilization and Christian schools. And again, if you like the show, let us know by following or subscribing. Hit the like button. That'll let others know the show's worth checking out, and it certainly makes a difference, and I'd appreciate that. Remember, the only way we're going to turn things around in our country is to increase the number of people who hold a biblical worldview. The greatest hope we have to get there is Christian education. I'm Dr. Cy Smith. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.